So, as we come into chapter 6, we have this underlying debate about who Jesus is, the sonship, and the relationship between the members of the Trinity, which, of course, in the first century, I think that we underestimate just how much they understood. I think that they already had a good idea of that. As I was saying, it was already something that was part and parcel of Jewish thinking. That's why you've got, like in 2 Esdras 2 verse 47 to be precise, somebody referred to as the Son of God, and Nathaniel immediately exclaims, "Oh, you are the Son of God," in chapter 1 of John. And so there's this emerging thing about the identity of who Jesus is, and this would have been a major issue amongst Jewish people in terms of evangelism, realizing that Jesus is the Messiah, understanding what that really means. One of the things that we haven't really hit on is the fact that in the synoptic gospels it's quite clear at first they don't really know who he is, although they're following him, they call him rabbi or what have you, and then it's about halfway through that Peter confesses, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," whereas in John's gospel it's right from the beginning, "We've found the Christ," spoken about by Moses. But they didn't understand what that meant. Throughout all of this, they had this idea that their Messiah was going to be some kind of a sort of swashbuckling hero at the front of an army, and they wanted the sort of establishment of a Jewish kingdom, a geopolitical military kingdom in Israel. Very much the hope and dreams of the Zionists today. And because they were holding on to that, many Jews missed who Jesus was, because Jesus came to bring a kingdom that was spiritual. And I do feel that sometimes when Christians, sort of kowtow too much to the Zionist agenda, even though I'm favourably disposed towards Israel and I love the Jewish people, I don't have any illusions that God is interested in a geopolitical military power in the Middle East. He's really not. He's interested in those who are saved, and this is what's really important. So as we come into chapter 6, we start to see something emerging. I say start, it's already actually been there right from the beginning. In 1 verse 17, the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ, and this is where John is really going. The thing is that Moses gave them the tabernacle, which later became the temple. He gave them the priesthood, the sacrifices, the law. He gave them everything, and those things had become points of reference, reverence, I should say, to the Jewish people. They turned them into something to worship. We have the temple, and they hid behind that, spiritually speaking, and it was one of those things whereby the things of God had become exalted. And given that God had promised that he would send a prophet like unto Moses, it was understood that one day there would be somebody who would come and give all of those same things. And this is what we see emerging. I've already mentioned this, I've already gone over this, but this is just an introduction to chapter 6 and chapter 7, because they all run together. Again, it's all about context. We tend to lift these stories out individually and preach on them one at a time, whereas actually the whole thing holds together. The whole of the first half of John's Gospel holds together, but particularly these passages are a cohesive case for showing that Jesus is the greater Moses. All right, because he is the tabernacle. 1 verse 14, he tabernacled amongst us. He is the dwelling place of God. So therefore he is the Father's house. John 14, in my Father's house are many rooms. It's not talking about Jesus coming back, or it's not talking about a place up in heaven. It's talking about Jesus, and we see that particularly in chapter 7, because the water flows from the temple in Ezekiel's vision, and that's what Jesus claims for himself. Okay, and here, of course, he not only gives them bread, but he is the bread, and we'll see that come out, because of course they had that bread and they died, but if you have this bread you live forever. Okay, and so therefore Jesus is not just a prophet like Moses, he's a prophet who's better than Moses. And these are things which I've already said, but I just want to pull it together in terms of chapter 6 and 7. The other thing is, of course, there are references from the Psalms which have a significant pattern. I spoke about those as an individual thing, whereby you can see that he's the new tabernacle, he's the new Moses. And of course we have some famous ego eimi sayings, okay, I am sayings. Alright, these are really important. I've had a separate teaching on that as well. In particular, in this passage, we've got John 6:20, I am, do not be afraid. That's on the water. And then, of course, I am the bread of life in various forms. I am the living bread. And also, of course, here, this is debatable. Okay, it's not quite clear because the ego eimi are separated within the sentence. So it's the ego and the eimi, the I and am. So it's a bit debatable. It could be, it might not be. Jury's out. Nobody knows. And of course, in chapter 7, which is the passage about the water, the eimi and the ego are reversed. The question is that actually an ego eimi saying, or is it deliberate? Is it some kind of a device that John is using to bring out a particular point? And there's various ways in which this might play out. All right. So with that, we can actually go into John chapter 6 in the next video.